Hey folks, I'm here doing another SQL interview problem. Let's get started. I will pick one here. Let's try this Amazon finding user purchases problem. As usual, I haven't looked at this or anything beforehand to try to simulate an interview as much as possible. I'll start the timer here, and because it's a medium problem, I'll try to do it in less than 5 minutes. Write a query that will identify returning active users. A returning active user is a user that has made a second purchase within 7 days of any other of their purchases. Output a list of the user IDs of these returning active users. Okay, so I like that the prompt is short and sweet, and there's only one table here which doesn't have a lot of columns. So there's got to be something tricky about this. Let's see. The first step to any problem is to understand the data that you have. So we have just one table. I assume that ID is the ID, like purchase ID, the user ID is the ID of the user. So I think that these first two columns will be useful. Item, I don't think that's useful. Revenue, the question doesn't mention anything about revenue, so I don't think that's useful. Created at is going to be useful because there's a time component, right? They want to know a list of users that have made a purchase within 7 days of another purchase. Okay, so let's get started here. This table really looks like just a list of purchases, right? It's got user ID and the purchase ID. But we need to know, did users who purchased, did they purchase again within 7 days? So for that, I'm thinking we will do a self-join. And I'll talk about that in a second as I type this out. Let me just type it out first. So we're going to join on user ID, and then, and I'll talk about this, guys, as I finish. I just want to make sure that this will work. Let's see. We need to. Now, my next step here is to figure out the time component of the question. All right, let me pause here and explain. So we have an initial table of transactions. We're joining it to each other on user IDs. So but critically here, we're joining where the purchase is not the same. So what I'm saying is this table will get me all the purchases that users have made. And then by joining it in this way, it will also give me purchases that users have made that wasn't the same as that original purchase. That's kind of hard to explain. So maybe let me finish writing this out a little bit more, and then I'll run the query so we can see the results. But for now, I'm going to try to figure out the date component of this question. Okay, so if I run this, what we see here is that, okay, user 109, they bought something on the 3rd. They also bought something on the 2nd. And this calculates the number of days. In this case, they bought something on the 3rd, they bought something on the 22nd, that's 19 days in between. We want to find purchases where the days are less than 7, essentially. Well, between 0 and 7 days. So to do that, let's wrap this first part in a CTE. And then what is the output that they want? They just want a list of user IDs, and they also don't care about the ordering. So from this original output, we can see that there's a lot of duplicates, so we'll do select distinct user ID from ag, where days since prior purchase between 0 and 7. Let's try this. So this seems to work. Let's check the solution. Okay, great. And I did get it in just under 5 minutes. Let me talk about this question just a little bit. These types of questions are deceptively tricky, and unfortunately, you just have to grind these types of questions. I've done so many that I kind of know what to look for when I'm reading the prompt, but it looks simple, right? The prompt is 2 lines, and there's only 1 table, and there's not a lot of columns. Sometimes the interview question will be a pretty long prompt, and or it will have a lot of tables, and or the table will have a lot of columns. Those are tricky for a different reason. Those are tricky because they're trying to throw a lot of information at you to see if you can follow instructions and pay attention to detail and parse out what's important or not. In this case, you don't really have that issue because the prompt is short and there's only 1 table with not a lot of columns. However, conceptually, it's a little bit tricky, right? Because there's 1 table, and it tells you all of the purchases that users made, but it doesn't tell you when the last time that they made a purchase was. And that's what you need to know, right? You need to know, did they make a second purchase within 7 days of any other purchase? And to do that, you have to join the table to itself. And I think that maybe this is not something that folks do that often. Well, honestly, in my own job, I do it pretty often, but I think in an interview question scenario, it's not that obvious. And then what also makes it tricky is you want to make sure that you're not joining the same purchase to each other, which is why you need this part. So yeah, this question is a little bit tricky, but hopefully you found this walkthrough useful. If there are specific questions that you'd like to see me try and solve, let me know. Thanks.